Good morning, everybody. It's 10:15, and so we're going to get started so we can get out of here on time, because I'm sure just like you guys, we've all got flights to catch today and places to be and things to do. So my name is Christina Kozik. I am the Community Engagement Specialist with Exceptional Lives, and I'm here today with two of my colleagues, and we are going to be talking about rethinking family engagement in special education. And so I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and then we'll get this party started.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nell Quest Curran. I am also at Exceptional Lives, and we'll tell you a little bit more about who we are and what we do in a minute.
Hi, everybody. I'm Teresa Nichols. I am a consultant that works closely with family engagement with Exceptional Lives, and I'm excited to be here today. I am a parent, but I'm also an educator, school psychologist. I was a state director of special education in Tennessee, and those experiences really influenced the work that led me here around family engagement and alternate dispute resolution. Being a parent of a child with a disability, also being able to see firsthand at the state level the impact that family engagement and dispute resolution can have on impacting systems change. And I'm just really excited to be here with this group this morning.
So we're going to tell you a little bit about who we are. Teresa will tell you a little bit about who Partner Ed Solutions is. I am going to close this door real quick. Oh, thank you. So at Exceptional Lives, we're a national nonprofit that works with families and school systems, whether at the state level, the district level, the school building level, to build family engagement. And so we do that using Karen Mapp's dual capacity framework. So we know that we have to build the capacity of both sides, so that way they can come together to be collaborative members of their child's special education team. And so we do this in a variety of ways. We do this through professional development, family workshops, coaching, and some other kind of UX, plain language pieces as well.
So I'm going to say a little bit more about who I am too. I also come to this work as, I have a PhD in social science. I love the data, right? But I come to this work partly because this is who my family is too, right? I have an autistic child. I am autistic myself. One of the things that it's really important for us to think about is we're so grateful for all of the work that all of you do. And a lot of what you do is conflict resolution and helping when things have already kind of gone poorly. We're kind of working from the front end a little bit. And how we think of what we do is like, this is conflict prevention and burnout prevention. And if you can't prevent the burnout and you can't work on solving the systems and capacity issues, you can't actually prevent the conflict. And by the time you get it, everyone is already escalated, right? Everybody is already maxed out cognitively. And so what we do is offer concrete strategies and techniques that help districts and states and families all kind of understand and approach this process collaboratively from the jump and look at every time they talk as a chance to do it better, to build trust. So,
and I always forget to give a little bit more background about myself. So as I said, I'm the community engagement specialist at Exceptional Lives, but I'm also neurodivergent, and I'm raising a child who has autism and ADHD, along with a few other things. And so we are in our state's public school system. We are in special education. And I've been very fortunate that we at Exceptional Lives are working with the state of Louisiana with our Department of Education. And one of the districts that we're working very closely with on a pilot project is my son's school district. And so to be able to do this work professionally, but then also see it happening and the changes being made and the mindset shifts happening in real time as a parent has been very encouraging. And so that's a little bit more about me. Okay.
So Partner Ed Solutions is a company that I started up after leaving the State Department as a way to, again, push into the passion that I developed around dispute resolution, but mainly around trying to prevent conflict. So I work primarily with state agencies, school districts, and families, as well as parent training and information centers to help bring information to build capacity and to build out alternate dispute resolution frameworks. Is primarily the work that we do with Partner Ed Solutions. And again, I've been really fortunate to have been able to partner with Exceptional Lives through that work.
So real quick, we have some session objectives. I'm not going to read from the slide because nobody needs that, right? But these are the 3 things that we would like to come out of this session. And at the very least, just kind of rethinking what family engagement looks like in your district, in your state, with your special ed families. And then we're going to cover, really kind of dive down into family engagement and how it plays a part in all of these different places with alternative dispute resolution. What are some barriers you're seeing? And then what are those opportunities that present themselves to engage with your families? So one of the things that we do here at Exceptional Lives is we attempt to use plain language. Plain language is capitalized because it's a thing, and it's writing and talking in a way that you're understood the first time. And so one of the things that is right there in plain language under effective communication is the main point up front. And so we like to put this right there for you. The main thing we want you to get out of today is clear, respectful communication with families builds trust and contributes to effective family engagement. This improves experiences and outcomes for students, families, teachers, and schools. And as Nell said, conflict prevention, burnout prevention. When we have these real good relationships and good communication with our families, we're able to make a lot more progress.
And I want to say, this is our first time presenting at Cadre, and we've been so impressed to be here, to be part of the rooms, to be part of the conversations that y'all are having.
Yeah.
And they're so good, and you're thinking so intensively, and you're already at this level where, like, you know the importance of building trust, and you know the pitfalls people are already having doing it. And we know that. And we're so grateful for the work that you're doing. One thing we'd like to ask you to do in this session is to take the opportunity to, like, remember that there are ways you might need to pull down a little bit and really think about, like, okay, what is it that families do and don't know? Where are they getting mixed up and confused to the point where, you know, if you help schools understand how to explain this stuff better from the beginning, right? What kind of things could you prevent by, like, understanding that family perspective from the beginning before everything has, like, kind of already gone awry and folks already feel like they maybe either aren't understanding what's happening well, or maybe being talked down to or discounted. A lot of times special education teams do not understand that they have their own culture, that they are coming at this with their own language, that they are coming at this with their own, you know, processes that have to be followed. And families don't understand that that's a culture either. And so any of these conversations, you have to remember they're happening cross-culturally. So we try to keep our language simple on our slides. We try to model what plain language looks like. And there's going to be some information that you already know, but we've got stuff to add.
So one of the things we always like to do is we want to find out who's in the room. So how many of you are at the district level or a school building level? Okay, that's what we thought. So how many of you are all at the state level? Okay, partner organizations. Okay, awesome. How many of you are parents of a child in special education? Awesome. And then how many of you were previously teachers? Or maybe currently still are a teacher. Okay, so again, we know that the information we're going to be presenting to you today is not new. We know that you guys know this, but we want to help you kind of shift the lens in which you're looking at it and how we can refocus that information in a way that allows for better family engagement. So
I would like to ground this conversation in just the ADR continuum more broadly. And I'm just going to point at you whenever, yeah, I'm just going to point. Go ahead and switch that slide. Okay. So I feel like we share this data in just about every presentation, but it's, I think, important as just a reminder of the reality that we're all facing, regardless of the roles that we are playing in ADR, that there is increased demand, there's increased disputes that we're seeing nationally, and that definitely has an impact on our interventions. It has an impact on the way that we both prevent and respond to and engage in conflict. And so if we go to the next slide and we think about the reasons that we're seeing increased findings or in due process hearings, this is a recent study. Well, it's actually not so recent anymore. 2017 doesn't seem that far away, but I guess in research world, it is, you know, kind of we're probably due for another research study, Perry Zerkel. So this study was done that looked at the parts of the IEP process that are most vulnerable in due process hearings. And of course, the number one that came out of this research study was parental participation, which I think is just a really good reminder for the work that we're doing in family engagement, right? The need is there at the very early stages of intervention to engage families in such a way that they feel empowered to be able to meaningfully participate, right? So going back into the dual capacity framework, right? We know that we want to make sure to build capacity of educators to involve families, but we also know that families need their capacity as well to be able to meaningfully engage as well. So knowing that parental participation is so critically important to the IEP process, but it's also integral in the dispute resolution findings.
Teresa, could I interject real quick here? So I'm from Louisiana, just north of New Orleans. And just last year, I believe it was last year, it might have even been the end of the previous year, our State Department of Education was audited. And the very first report that came out had to do with dispute resolution. And the biggest thing that they found is that the ball was being dropped when complaints were being filed. Parents were not being followed up with. So you already have these disgruntled parents who are upset about what's going on. And then they weren't getting calls back. They weren't getting emails back. And so again, this really brings in this part here of parent participation, right? So because so many of those had happened, it led to a full-on audit and investigation about it. And so as a parent and as, you know, doing this work, it was very eye-opening to see that by no fault of any one person, this stuff does happen, but it does change the whole narrative of now how is the parent going to feel, because they're supposed to be able to go to the state, make these complaints and get heard, and they're not. And so parent participation, huge piece.
Absolutely a huge piece. The other thing that I want to call out here, and I don't have it on a slide, but we know when we look at the data that we do have, and I agree it's a little bit old, which we should do this work again too. Special ed teachers are leaving the profession within 5 years. We know this. We have jobs that can't be filled. We have capacity issues that are making it harder for everyone involved to find time and empathy to do what they need to do. And when special ed teachers are leaving the profession, they're saying they're doing it because the conflict, like aversion models and the covering for liability models that are happening in their districts are disempowering them from building the relationships that they need with the families. And they don't have participation from the families, and they don't feel empowered to build relationships in a way that matches everybody. And we know that's hard, right? Like we understand nobody wants these complaints to go up. But that closing ranks is happening so quickly that people just don't have the opportunities to do the things that they went into education for, because nobody went into education with the goal of denying children services or making families and teachers' lives harder. And those are systems issues. We know those are systems issues. Our goal is to help families understand how to approach these conversations well, and for administrators to do that at the same time.
No, I'm going to let you follow along with my story because some of you have heard this, but I like to use this as a way to relate the experience of families when it comes to IEP meetings. So I know we've already kind of polled, and we have some folks in here that are also family members of children with disabilities, and so you've likely been in an IEP meeting both as an educator and as a parent. But not all educators, not everyone in our roles have had that experience, and we get so caught up in the day-to-day of the work that we do, whether we're mediators, whether we're complaint investigators, whether we're case managers, special ed supervisors, right? We know special ed inside and out. We go to IEP meetings day in and day out. This is our bread and butter, right? We take for granted the fact that we go through this all day, every day. It's a familiar experience to us, but for a lot of our families who are especially going through an IEP meeting for the first time, right? It's hard for us to put ourselves in their shoes, right? And to remember what it felt like the first time that you as a parent entered that IEP conference room and went through this process, right? So I always relate back and try to find, is there an experience that is much more common, right, to the layperson that might in some way mirror the experience that families have in our IEP meetings? And so I actually had this experience not too long ago that made me think about that experience that I had as a parent the first time I got that phone call that my child was struggling in school, right? And so a couple weeks ago, I actually went to the doctor's office, which was a long time coming. I hadn't been in quite some time because it's not my favorite thing to do, but apparently you get to a certain age and you're supposed to do that more frequently. So my family was like, yeah, Mom, it's time for you to, I've got my two oldest kids now, they're young adults and they're both in the like medical field. And they're like, yeah, prevention is really important. So says the ADR continuum, right? So prevention. I was going to the doctor's office and I walk in because it had been so long since I had been at the doctor's office. They told me to get there early to fill out paperwork. I needed to fill out new patient paperwork again. So I showed up early and I went up to the counter and got my paperwork from the receptionist, and she was clearly unhappy with her job, did not enjoy her profession, and was quite clear to me that I wasn't early enough, that I was supposed to be there 30 minutes early to fill out my paperwork. And unfortunately, I was only 20 minutes early. And so as someone who prides themselves in trying to be early and oftentimes failing, I was really proud of myself for being there 20 minutes early, but it wasn't good enough. And so when I sat down, I was feeling really frustrated, right? So I got my paperwork, I sat down to fill it out, and I was feeling extremely frustrated. The nurse comes and gets me from the waiting room. She pulls me back into the little nurse's station and she takes my blood pressure. She also seems to be in a really big hurry and she rattles off a couple of numbers. And y'all, I told you I haven't been to the doctor's office in a while. I know that there's two numbers and a blood pressure, but I don't know which one's supposed to be higher than the other. I don't know what my blood pressure was last time I was at the doctor's office, probably 15 years ago. I didn't know what was normal, all the things. I had no point of reference. I just had these two numbers that were thrown at me before she walked away. So I'm sitting there and I'm kind of waiting for my next set of instructions and I'm feeling really confused. If you want to hit the next slide, there you go. And so, I'm wondering what those numbers mean. I'm kind of feeling a little bit disoriented. I felt a little bit off my game because everyone else in the room seemed to know what that blood pressure meant. No one seemed really worried, but I didn't know if I should be worried. So I go into the doctor's office, like the exam room, and I'm waiting for the doctor. And as I'm sitting there, of course, I don't want to be there in the first place. I'm there for prevention, but who knows? Maybe there's going to find something that's, problematic, right? I'm getting to that age where I'm like, maybe I should start worrying about some of these things. And so I'm finding myself starting to spiral, right? I'm not a person that typically stresses out about things, but I found myself kind of starting to spiral. So again, I'm not sitting on the floor like this guy, but like I'm starting to feel myself get anxious and stressed out, right? So now I'm frustrated because there's arbitrary rules that I don't know anything about. I'm confused about the information I've gotten so far, and I'm starting to stress myself out, right? I'm wondering, am I going to stroke out in this room? What's about to happen? So the doctor comes in and, she's also, again, in a big hurry. I think insurance is limited the time they can actually work with you, so she's in and out. She comes in and just, straight to the point, no small talk, she's asking me questions. I'm asking her questions. She gives me the link to a website the link to a website to answer some of the questions that I have, and she's gone in no time at all, right? And so I'm leaving there, and I'm kind of feeling like I can't even trust a word that this doctor just said because she didn't really give me the time of day. I didn't feel listened to. I didn't feel heard. I didn't feel like my concerns were validated, right? And as I'm walking out of the doctor's office, like any really good special educator, I'm wondering, is this how our families feel when they leave an IEP meeting, right? And I see some nods. Absolutely. We've got language. We have arbitrary rules in special ed, right? Kind of like, let's get there early, but it's not clear what early means. There's a lot of language and a lot of rules that we have that aren't clear. They're oftentimes not clear to those of us in special ed. Never mind, are they clear to other people that are recipients of our policies, right? So that's going to lead to quite a bit of frustration in our families. We use all kinds of jargon in education, and then you throw in special education on top of it. It's like a language all of its own. We all know the language, we all know the jargon, but it probably causes a whole lot of confusion to other people that aren't necessarily a part of our world. And then thinking about the stress that's involved. The situation itself is high stress, right? It's inherent that families are coming into these meetings feeling stressed out, whether in the best of circumstances, right? Even without there being some kind of a disagreement or conflict, right? Being in a situation where your child is struggling in school and you're there at the table to work with another, team to put some supports in place. You don't know what's about to happen. You don't know the process. You don't know the system. It's stressful, right? And so of course we have distrust between schools and families, right? There is a systemic distrust that exists, and we're all a part of that system in some capacity, right? And knowing that there are processes in place that we can, there are things that we can put in place to help address these conditions, right? So thinking about what are some ways that we can engage our families. So again, anchoring this conversation in the ADR continuum, I can tell you from my perspective as a state director in Tennessee, we don't talk about ADR in Tennessee at all. We have conflict, resolution, we have procedural safeguards, and we have a family engagement kind of contract with the ARC of Tennessee that helps with our family engagement work. I'm really proud of the work that we did in Tennessee to expand that family engagement work, to build the capacity of our local education agencies to be able to more meaningfully engage families. But we don't have anything in between. We don't have a true ADR framework in Tennessee, and I'm sure a lot of you are in the same boat. But remembering and anchoring ourselves in the fact that family engagement isn't necessarily a separate quote unquote initiative, right? It's not a separate work stream, that family engagement is on that prevention level of intervention when we think about how to address and engage in conflict. So we'll talk a little bit about what real family engagement is and why it matters. And I think I'm going to hand this over.
Before you get started, I'll turn this back on. Hello? Okay, there I am. So one of the things that I do want to say is, as Teresa was saying, family engagement is a part of ADR. And it's also, we don't have the slide in here, but it's also been proven through decades of research to increase outcomes across the board, from the individual student to the teachers to the staff, the school culture, as well as the district as a whole. And that's a thing that we're hearing a lot of right now. Graduation rates, literacy rates, right? All of these things are tied to family engagement. When we have really good family engagement, we don't just have less conflict, but we have really good student outcomes and school building, district level outcomes across the board. And we have happier teachers who are more likely to stay.
So, yeah, I wanted to kind of bring that up too. And the other thing that I just want to say here, right, is that it's very interesting because there is this kind of very good evidence-based research and practices around how to do family engagement in the dual capacity building framework. There are reasons those folks didn't include special ed separately when they were developing those frameworks, right? And those are good reasons. But it's a little bit interesting that IDEA has had family engagement mandates for longer than anyone in general ed has had them. And yet, partly because these can be seen as intractable problems where it's like hard to show the progress that you're making, right? Some of those ideas about how to do family engagement well haven't kind of trickled into some of the special ed spaces. So, so some of what we're doing is that work to build it and to help districts and states figure out how to make it so that we know that we already think we're doing family engagement the entire IEP process, but we also know that all of the forms and all of the procedural safeguards and all of the processes and all of the requirements were built without that knowledge of like, what does it actually mean to engage a family? And so this often means that, for special educators in particular, and also for building leaders, they still don't understand the difference between families who are involved, right? And like showing up to volunteer for the school play or coming to math night, right? And families who are engaged, who understand what their kids struggle with, who understand what the school day looks like, who have good relationships with teachers, right? And so we all desperately need help figuring out how to get everyone both the time and the capacity and also just the hope, right? The hope to be able to start to figure out how to do the relationship building pieces of family engagement, the parts that actually do make people stay in their jobs. And so this is sort of how you do that.
So throughout this presentation, Nell, and even Teresa will kind of interject some of our own personal stories about how this has looked for us. And this is one of the parts where I interject the story. So as I said, I'm from Louisiana. My husband works offshore, which means he's gone for 3 to 4 weeks at a time, and then he's home. And it's been like that since my son was born. It's our normal. Well, when my son was first starting school, I never thought to tell the teachers, hey, dad left today, or hey, grandma's coming for, a couple of weeks to help out. The change is very consistent in our house. It's one of the only consistent things in our home is change. And so when my son was in first grade, the teacher called me and said, hey, I just wanted to let you know, Robert had a really rough day today. Did anything happen at home? Were there any changes? And I'm like, no. And I thought about it. I go, oh, dad left today. She goes, oh, okay. She goes, well, why don't we start, can you share that with me when dad leaves or when dad's coming home so we can give him some grace in his behavior and kind of help give him some strategies? Because he was a little guy at the time. I think he was 6 years old and he's 11 now. And I said, yeah, I didn't think about that. But that was a genuine opportunity for the teacher to engage me so she could understand what was going on in our individual family and our individual family culture that helped inform what was going to happen in that classroom. Right. So now my kid's not getting written up for behavior problems. He's not getting suspended for behavior problems because they know that this happens. And pretty soon the teachers are able to tell my husband's work schedule. They don't need me. They're able to tell it's been 3 weeks, dad's coming home today, or it's been 3 weeks, dad's leaving today. And so this is where, I was fortunate enough that I had a teacher who had the capacity to do that. And it also reminded me that I have to be proactive on the parent side and also engage with them.
My own child is on the younger end of the folks on our team, and you can go forward a slide. Yeah. So we've summarized some of the key elements of family engagement based on the family engagement research side rather than the special ed research side. And I want to talk about these points a little bit, but I am going to add a story as well. So when you're doing family engagement well, when you're doing conflict prevention of any kind well, the goals are the communication's really clear. Both sides build trust. That's really important, right? Because when you build trust, you then have that trust that you can also bank. We'll talk a little bit about that too. You can bank trust if you form relationships with families that are good one time, right? You can sort of start to bank trust so that when things go wrong, there's more flexibility and more empathy. using an asset-based view. It's so hard when these meeting structures are overwhelming, they're confusing, and also the first thing everybody does is come in and say everything that is going wrong with the child. And we know that they have to go that way, right? Like the form works that way. But that means that a lot of the interactions that are happening within the IEP process are based in this negativity that both makes families feel worried and sometimes makes them feel like they're being accused that they're not doing enough from the very beginning, right? And that when you use like an asset-based view instead and are able to say like, look, hey, y'all really know your child. We really need that information. How can we, what can we understand? It gets really, really different. I also think that oftentimes at every level, everyone forgets that there's a power dynamic that's already determined when you walk into that room. We know that for many disabilities, for many kinds of learning differences, there are genetic questions here too, right? So sometimes the parents are going to be folks who may have challenges learning information in some ways as well, and they aren't going to necessarily have gotten support for that. You have to know them well enough to help understand how to present that information.
And real quick, I also want to say the power dynamic is also not just between the educator or whoever's leading that IEP meeting and the parent, but it's also side by side, right? The gen ed teacher may not know how they fit in on this team. You may have providers in there. This may be a facilitated IEP where you have someone coming in from the district level, or as these go up higher in the process, you may have somebody there from the state level, right? And so that's going to change the power dynamic between peers as well as between the professionals and the parents as well. So we also want to remember that part of the power dynamic as well.
We can move forward.
Okay.
So all of those elements for family engagement are great, right? What we've done here is say, okay, like, how is this different in special education? And these are the ways that we want people on the education side of the table to understand what they need to do differently. But I want to make it really clear, we give this same information with the same message to families as well. We offer family trainings in how to approach these processes differently. And the information is the same. It's presented very clearly. And families want this. I don't think people realize the extent to which families want these relationships. We've done lots of focus groups. You know, we've been working statewide in Louisiana for like 10 years, right? We've done lots of focus groups on what families say they want. And these are not families who are already in conflict, although they're close a lot of times. What families say they want is to know who's working with their kid well enough that they can have honest conversations, right? And to be able to kind of build those relationships and solve those problems. And I know that when some of y'all see folks, those relationships are broken. But one of the things that we want everybody to think about is like, okay, how do we set things off on the right note? When my child was getting his like first early childhood IEP, right? We were transitioning from an IFSP to an IEP. He didn't qualify because like by one point, whatever, the first time we did the evaluation, then he got diagnosed. This was COVID times, right? So it took a little while. So 14 months after the state said he doesn't need services, right? Or the district said he doesn't need services. I went to take him in to just do a child find screening, right? The district special ed leader saw me, saw that my child had not like the differences between peers were probably starker because he was older, right? And what she said to me when she saw me there and realized that she had a kid with an autistic kid on her hands who like should have been getting services the whole time and who they denied them. And I work in this, so I was able to like understand this, right? But what she said to me was, "What happened here, Mom? When we saw him last time, he was talking this way and doing these things." And what actually was going on is that like people hadn't understood how his language processing works yet, right? So like things looked different than they were, depending on how much knowledge you had to interpret it. But what she said to me in that moment was, I know it was based in her fear that as, somebody who is an educated parent who is coming in and where services had been denied, that I was already a high conflict risk, even though I had received 0 services from the district. right? And hadn't complained about it. And that already set things off in this, oh, wait, this is going to be really complicated. This is going to be a fight. And I'm not sure if I can trust these people, right? And now that I do what I do, and now that I've learned what to do, when my IEP meetings start now, right, I say the same thing that I said to all of you. This is a really hard time to be an educator, and I'm not sure I could do this every day. And I am so grateful for everyone in this room for showing up with the systems that they have, knowing that those systems aren't going to do everything all at once, right? I'm so grateful for you and that you're here. Let's figure out what I can do and what you can do within the confines of that to help this kid.
Yeah.
And it changes everything. It gets more services for my kid. It makes it so that somebody will say to me, like, we wanted to increase speech therapy this year. It wasn't even my idea. It was the speech therapist. At our last IEP meeting, she said to me, like, look, I think he's at a critical point. I think we could go up to 3 times a week instead of twice a week. But I'm always reluctant to put that in the written IEP because I need to make it really clear that if there's a family emergency, I'm the only speech therapist here. If, somebody's sick, if you start counting hours, if we look at what he's getting and there's like makeup sessions that are expected, when we're at 3 times a week, I can't do them. And so I get really nervous to write that down. And so like, can we like talk about what that looks like? Right? I know that conversation will make a lot of administrators really nervous. I know it will make a lot of administrators really nervous. They can have that conversation with me because they know me and we've built a lot of trust, right? And parents can all learn this. I'm not particularly exceptional, right? Parents can learn that the system is hard and that also those educators are all well-intended. The challenge that we're having is that when school systems, states, districts, and buildings don't communicate things well and build relationships well in order to for whatever reasons they do it, it's not that those parents aren't going to get the information they need. When you don't have the resources available in a way they can understand them, they're going to go ask a Facebook group. They're going to go ask the local moms group. They're going to go ask the PTIC, and the PTICs are great, right? They're great. They're so helpful. And also the person who you get who's going to be your case manager at the PTIC is somebody whose kid's a little bit older. They've already had the experiences they've had. The people in those Facebook groups are already mad. And the advice that they're going to be giving is go in fighting, go in swinging, document everything, make sure everything's in writing. And you don't want that to be the first advice somebody's getting.
Yeah.
So the question is, do districts and states want to control this narrative? If you do, everyone needs to learn how to present this information in a way that families can digest it and understand it. And everyone needs to learn how to empower teachers and trust teachers enough when they're doing this distinct kind of work in special ed, especially, that they can build trust and bank trust and give you flexibility. And so that's what we're trying to teach people how to do.
And one of the other things, this kind of falls under collaboration, is that you have trusted resources that you can share with families and educators, right? We know that general ed educators don't have to take but 1 or 2 special ed courses, right? So a lot of times what we hear from our general ed teachers is we don't know how we fit in here in the collaboration part. We don't know how we're a part of the team once that referral gets sent off, even though that child may be in their class 50, 60, 70% of the day. And so having trusted resources that you can send families to so they can, or families and educators to, so they can get that information is very helpful. And sometimes I know at the state level, there's a lot of time and money spent in building out resources, but sometimes they're hard to understand, even for educators. And so that's, kind of another part of what we're talking about here is making sure it's clear and it's easy to understand. Anyways, let me go to the next slide. So, excuse me, building trust and relationships starts before the IEP meeting. As Nell said, you know, she walks in for that second evaluation, and the first thing out of the woman's mouth is, "What happened here, Mom?" I had a different experience when I called Child Find to say I needed my child to be evaluated. And I explained that I was in a private preschool. She said, okay, she said, well, I don't have an opening until such and such date. And I think it was about 2 or 3 weeks out. And I told her, I said, that's great. I'll take the opening. I said, but I don't know that my child's going to be in school in 2 weeks for you guys to come in and do an evaluation. We're at a tipping point here. And she said, okay. She goes, let me call you back. She hangs up. She calls me back about 10 minutes later and she goes, I can get you in. It was like a Tuesday. She's like, I can get you in Thursday, but it's at 7:30 in the morning, kind of like right when we first opened. And I said, I will be there with bells on. And that in and of itself went a long way in building that trust of what was going to become our journey as a first step, right? I knew, okay, these are people that are willing to work, not just with me, but for my son, because I was honest and vulnerable and said, hey, this is where we're at. And so we have to remember that all of these things happen before the IEP meeting, and not just the first IEP meeting. Every IEP meeting we have, there has to be some work that has to go into it ahead of time so parents feel prepared. And so when they show up, they feel seen and heard. And also for the educators as well, right? Especially for our gen educators who may not really know how they fit in there. Okay, so building our relationships before the meeting. I mean, I think I just kind of went over why this is so important, right? And so I want you guys to think, and I know a lot of you said you're at a higher level or you are at partner organizations, but how are you doing this? How are you seeing this? How was this done for you if you're
District partners doing this, and
Yeah.
do you ask them?
right?
Do you ask them?
And again, this comes into the concept of banking trust. Well, we're streaming, so we still need, yeah, we do need the microphone. Thanks for the reminder back there.
I'm a family support specialist and I'm from the state of Maryland and
Okay.
I work for the Maryland State Department of Education. So trying to lay the layout for you because there are 23 counties in Baltimore City in the state of Maryland, and I have a counterpart in each one of those local school systems. So it's important that I saw your slides earlier for involvement, engagement. I would extend and refine that to say also educate and empower.
Yeah.
Because we educate parents about the special education process. We encourage them to keep notebooks for documentation purposes. We encourage them, we engage them in the language so that we level the playing field for them so that they're not talking over their heads when they go in the, IEP. I mean, so it's an acronym world. And I'm talking about the how we do this now, because I think it's important for them to be able to call me and ask questions, but also call that local family support person who may have more resources than I, because they know more about their local region than I at the State Department. So it's important to educate them and also empower them so that when they go in, and it's not just them, and I talk about NASCI all the time because I think it's important for us to learn to lead alongside of parents.
Yeah.
And so too often we don't understand how to lead alongside of parents. I'm talking about educators. My background is education. In the office, I work with 2 parents, okay, who have children with disabilities. And then it's me and another person who's been an educator, administrator as well. So we have, I'm saying, Kelly, tell me this, help me to understand that. So we have that point of view, or she'll say, can you tell me why a principal did X, Y, and Z, or why a teacher did X, Y, and Z? So with that perspective in there, we're able to sort of kind of go through whatever that particular parent is going through, what they need, and then give them all of the options. We give them questions that they can ask when they go to the table. But the important piece of why we do it to empower them.
Anybody else?
And that's great that you guys are doing that because that's not happening everywhere. I can-
Empowering
I can
parents
tell-
in
I can tell
special
you
ed and in the middle of conflict zones sounds crazy when you say it out loud.
I was supposed
It's
to throw
not-
this
we
at
know
you,
it
but I
sounds
don't want to hit this gentleman in the face.
Thank you.
I want to hit him.
We know it sounds crazy to tell your district partners who are worried about conflict and embroiled in conflict that you need to go empower families and you need to go empower teachers. Like we understand. But if we're actually going to prevent conflict and make everybody else's lives easier, that's what folks need, right? And so that's part of, and you are so good at doing that when the conflict is happening, like, so much, we're seeing that so much. And we just need to figure out how to get it in there earlier.
Thank you. I would just like to emphasize that, and I think that's a fantastic approach. And I run a PTI that serves a large southern state, and we have we have home rule, local control in our state, and so we have a whole mosaic of approaches of how families are engaged or not engaged, and what the attitude is coming from the top of the district administration. And in many districts, and it doesn't really matter the size, and our state is very diverse. We have incredible urban areas, very rural, and in between. And it really doesn't matter the size of the district or the nature of the district, but what makes a difference in how we see the potential conflict between families and schools, and the number of complaints that get filed, is the attitude of, does the district embrace our relationship? And I'm not just saying me, but it's the attitude of embracing families, having a positive attitude to work with them, and work through those difficult points. Because yes, of course, there is going to be conflict, there is going to be disagreements. That's the way IDEA is set up, is to, for families to not just take the word of the educational professionals, but to be equal partners in the process. And those districts who have more of a less open engagement policy, let's put it that way, because of concerns about liability and so forth. I can tell you, from having done this as the CEO of our organization for over 20 years, and as an attorney in private practice for many years before that, that is a self-defeating proposition.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to be spending time with lawyers, don't take that attitude, and just plain and simple. Because again, what we hear from our families who come to us is exactly that. Why are you coming to us? Why are you looking to file a state complaint? Why are you looking to go to due process? It's because I can't get through to the people on the other side.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason that may be. So that's my two cents for it.
One of the districts that we work with in Louisiana was very, the buy-in to work with us happened very easily, very quickly from the beginning. And what it was is, we had a new special ed, secondary education special ed person. And he said, this is a changing of the guards. We have 3 new people. All of the old people have left. And we know, because we were educators here, that the way that things were being handled before were not in a very family-friendly, approachable way, and we want to make the changes. And so the first family workshop we did, a lot of people came in, they had complaints and things like that, because they just thought this was another venue for them to get hurt at. Second family workshop we did, it was actually people coming in that wanted information, so that way they could be educated, empowered. And just in that short time span, we were able to see a little bit of a shift within the family mindset, because they realized there is change happening, that the new people in power want to be proactive about how they're approaching families, how they're getting information out there. And so it's it does. It really comes from the kind of the top down. And there's been a culture change and mind shift change with the educators as well as how they interact with families and some of the different changes that they've made. And, within a very short period of time, within one school year, we were able to see that shift starting to happen and already starting to see that needle move. Okay.
All right, so we just talked about some things that you all are seeing as far as maybe some innovative ways that you're engaging families even before the IEP meeting starts, building those relationships. But I think we would all agree that there are some very real barriers to family engagement that we've experienced as well. And I think this gentleman over here just spoke to some of those as well. We're also hearing like mindsets as being one. But I'm curious, what other barriers have you all seen when it comes to true, authentic family engagement as this group has discussed?
Let me not hold it too close to my mic.
Or else you'll start whistling. Huh? My name is Giancarlo Caratini. I am with the Alabama Parent Education Center, which is a project of the Alabama PTI. My role is to be an outreach coordinator, ESL, English as a second language, because of the fact that language and culture is such a barrier to engage families that my position was created specifically to overcome that barrier. I'm Latin American, I'm a Latino, and Spanish is my first language. Kudos to speech pathologists for getting rid of my accent. Oh, it only cost $13,000 and 4 years of agony because insurance doesn't cover that.
Yeah.
And now come to find out that that's actually cool to have an ethnic accent, Yeah.
Maybe get it back.
Oh, I can get it back. I can sound like Conchita Morales from East LA anytime you want.
As a Latinx woman, yay.
No, I lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
No, barriers. Okay, language is one, and then the other. And I wrote a piece that I do for Hispanic or Spanish speaking families, and that is it's called language and cultural barriers to special education, where I tell them that the sub barriers are not relevant in this country and in the way that education is rendered. In our countries in Latin America, we have socialized education. So there's no room for special education. If you want a free education, you'll get one, but you have to pay back to the state in the means of service. For example, if you want a law license in a Latin American country, fine, we'll pay for your law school. We'll even call you, doctor, a Juris Doctor. But you're going to have to spend the first 4 years of your practice in a government office being basically a ministry counsel. And then you can get your license where you can make $400,000 a year, which is a lot of money in a Latin American country. But unless you do that and then dedicate, say, a month, a year to that type of socialized social work, you're not going to practice law. So that's why a lot of, attorneys from other countries that were trained in other countries are now counsel here in this country. So what I have done is debunked a lot of obstacles in these classes to parents. And that's what I do. I'm a parent education center. I educate parents. So asking for help is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
We are prideful people. We will not ask for help unless we absolutely have to. And special education is not an absolute. There's superstition. There's religious reasons that, don't go changing that child. That's what God sent you. And that is your albatross to carry for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Well, that's not the case. So I'm giving law lessons, procedural safeguards. And mind you, counselor, I am not one of your learned brothers. I don't have a law degree. So immediately they latch on to me as like, well, you'll speak for us. I said, I can't do that. I am not your legal representative. What you need to do is find yourself a lawyer that speaks Spanish and go through due process up to and including a state complaint. I'll write it for you, but I can't present it. I am not the father of the child. So we found so much of a need. I'm bringing this home. That not only was my position created, but also my mission, which is to not obstaculize, create obstacles for. If you could pronounce it, but then again, let's go back to it's. See, that's one thing about the English language. You know, you can make up whatever you want, and it's part of the
We
language.
talked about the English language yesterday.
In Spanish, we have a king that says, "Nah, not pleasing unto us." That's not a word, and it won't go into the dictionary. So anyway, that's another thing. How do you translate these laws that don't have any chance of ever existing in another country, in another legal system, and even, you know, translating something like faith is nearly impossible. So the point I'm trying to make is that the barriers that I encounter in teaching parents how to advocate for themselves and create a collaboration with a school district is akin, as we say in Alabama, you know, to get a fox to guard the hen house.
Yeah.
So it's a question. It's a lot of trust that the family places in their advocate, without again becoming their legal representative.
Right. So I'm hearing this loud and clear, right? That culture, language differences are going to be a huge barrier when it comes to being able to empower families. I've also heard that as someone who has worked at the state agency and trying to implement meaningful family engagement activities, you know, we would try to host things, right? We try to host webinars, and we try to go out regionally and host some educational, you know, opportunities. And parents don't show up to the state held events, like, you know, and so we saw that as a real opportunity to empower the locals. The families are going to go where they are closest, like they're close, you know, the closest entity that they have to them, which is their school, right? They're not going to come to a state sponsored event, but they might go to a school sponsored event. And so the fact, like Maryland, I wanted to just speak to the strategy that Maryland, it sounds like, is kind of, you know, building in some of those regional touch points, like getting closer to the families, and then taking it a step further to say, okay, but then how do we empower our schools? If that's going to be the first line of defense for our families, that's going to be the first place they go, right? Absolutely.
Second, how do we get it to the teams?
That's right.
You need to know it. It's one thing for the local families. I need to get it in.
Absolutely.
Can't get it down at school level, and it's all for nothing.
Exactly.
I like the fact that we are now looking at things like structuring how we work. Just put on my district in the school building, you know, that's what's important to me. Engaging and involved is important to me. And I use them loosely because all children were
They're all gen ed students first, right? They're all gen ed students first.
as we move into having separate, we still need to bring them back together so that everybody understands that we are. We keep forgetting it. And so leadership in the building, I'm at the building, leadership in the building has to take ownership of it and take that out to every teacher, every other assistant principal, and that's how it has to work. I didn't educate. I'm sorry, I didn't educate regular educators and special educators. I educated educators so that the gen ed folks got everything that the special ed folks and vice versa. So it was not about professionally developing them, but it goes back to leadership. And I keep asking, how are we training the principals? How are we training our leaders?
And there are organizations that are doing that work and they do it really well. And also they have not figured out how to cross that over into doing it with the special ed coordinators and the special ed district leaders. And we all need to be having that conversation too. I want to make it clear when we're talking about barriers, we're not just talking about like what's making it hard to do this for the families. We're talking about capacity shortage. We're talking about your time. We're talking about laborious, overstructured, complaint processes. We're talking about abusive complaint systems, some of which has like frustration and some of which is about like everybody just being escalated already and some of which we know is political and we're not going to talk about those parts, right? But everybody has their own context. I also want to make sure I give a really clear example of what this looks like, right? I do this for a living. For the first time in my life this year, I was, in the car, the phone rings, it's the school number. Everybody does the thing that everybody does when the school number rings, right? And it's the gen ed teacher. And I'm, my kid is in an inclusive classroom environment, right? Like he's in gen ed a lot. His language has really changed over the last year. He's saying many, many, many more things, but we still have some behavior stuff that we're working out. And I'm thinking, oh no, the gen ed teacher's coming. This is not, I've never had a call like this from a gen ed teacher, right? And what she says to me is hello, how are you? And I'm like, oh no, what did he do? Right? And what she says to me, partly I think because she has this family engagement training, right? What she says to me is, no, I know everybody gets worried. Don't worry, everything's fine. Everything's actually great. What I try to do is make sure that at least a couple of times throughout the year, I'm calling and I'm checking in with you and I'm telling you all of the great stories about what your kid is doing here in school. And so I want to share a little bit about what that looks like, what his day looks like. Right. And she can do that because the building principal places value on this. She has something like, 2 planning hours a week. She uses 2 of them 1 week a month to make phone calls like this. And I know that sounds crazy. And like, it's very, very hard to give people that time. But I also want to say that somebody needs to not just find a way to give the time to do it, but to find a way to teach special ed directors to tell their special educators that they might do it, like they should try it, especially if they think they're going to have to call that parent later. Make those phone calls less anxious on both sides, right? And here's another example just from my kid's school. My kid's school is amazing. I knock on wood. Everybody's always worried the placement's going to fall apart, right? I got messages last week when he had, variously like acted out physically, once with an adult and once with a child. Nobody wants those messages, right? That's not okay. He doesn't necessarily always have the language access he needs to do a different thing. But the messages I got were not, here's the disciplinary consequences, here's why you should pick him up early, here's the suspension that he's going to get. They were, we're so impressed because we saw him immediately have remorse and he was really upset. And, after he did it, he said, oh, I punched you. And then we went out in the hallway and they were able to work through it. And he went back into that class and he was upset with a para who, he doesn't always have one, right? And he was able to do the rest of the class independently. And, so she was able to leave 5 minutes later. The other one I got was from like the behavior support person who was like, he talked to me about his feelings. He told me he was anxious about going out to recess and I reassured him that he could stay in with me if he wanted to. Right. And this kid is doing great. So I want you to know that these things are happening. They also don't want us to automatically go to like those punitive places because that doesn't help them build the relationships they need with the child. So I'm using those examples, which are unicorns, right? I fully believe they can be unicorns. But I think we need to see the examples of when things are done well to think about how do we make special ed able to do more of like those kinds of supports, even if they're not at the same level? And at the systems level, yeah, everybody needs to give out the procedural safeguards. Are you sure that your special ed teachers, your building principals, right? Any of the folks who are doing communication directly with families, are you sure they know they can say things that aren't the procedural safeguards? Right? Are you sure that they know that they can put together a plain language handout that explains the process so that families know what it is? In our experience, they don't know that. They want to make sure that they're following the checklists and ticking the boxes because everyone is so worried about ticking the boxes to make sure that like due process isn't a nightmare, that they're sending everyone to due process before anybody knows anything about the kid.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit, perfect examples, right, of ways that you can engage families meaningfully before conflict starts to arise. I'm going to talk a little bit from like a systems level, because I know we've got some folks in here that are running PTIs or who are at the state level in subcapacity. And this is kind of the way I like to think about family engagement from a top, a systems level. And then we'll kind of get into some of the specific strategies as well. So a couple of things that I like to talk about when it comes to family engagement, as I mentioned, from a state level, we weren't having a whole lot of success engaging families directly. And so we expanded our family engagement contract to have those regional presences to help build the capacity of the locals to do the things that you all are talking about, right? And so these are just some things to be thinking about as you're working with state agencies or local agencies, you're working with school districts, ways that you can really encourage them to think about family engagement themselves, right? Without outsourcing it to the PTIs, without outsourcing it to other entities. How can they themselves? The first one is to become a reliable source of information. All right. And I have that in here as, a big picture, idea. But what this looks like, think about the experience that you yourselves had as families, getting that call, you're coming in for your first IEP meeting, you're coming in for your first ST meeting, and you probably have some questions, right? What's the first thing we do when we have questions about information that is unfamiliar to us? What do we do as humans right now in this current age? What do we turn to? Google, the www, right? We get on the internet and we search the interwebs for more information about what is this IEP thing that is, I'm getting called in for. All right. Those of you who are kind of, out in the field, have you taken a look at your local school or district's website lately?
Because I have, and it's not great.
Right. Well, and I'm just going to say, and I'm not saying that I've done this nationwide landscape of school district websites, but I have done quite a bit of sampling, right? And I can tell you that most of those websites are probably not going to provide the information, right, that families or the questions that families might have when they're getting called into these types of meetings, right? And so what do they do instead? They continue their www World Wide Web search, right? And they're going to land on maybe some other places. Hopefully they find your PTI, right? Hopefully they find that, but that's typically not where parents are looking, right? They're looking at their school district first. And when they don't find the information there, it kind of sends a message, well, if I can't trust them to provide me with some reliable information, I must have to turn elsewhere, right? It kind of goes back to that vacuum that Nell was talking about. And if we want to control that narrative, we have to be thinking about what's the kind of information that parents need, where are they going to go to access it? The first place is online. We'll put our contact information up at the end, but I just wanted to point out and plug just quickly while we're talking about this, that I do have a checklist on my website that is just like, some things that you might want to look for on a school or district website to answer questions about special ed, thinking about it through the lens of a family that might have questions the first time that they are involved in these types of processes. So encouraging our local school districts and our even local schools, right, to be really thoughtful about if they have a special education webpage, making sure that it's not just full of jargon, it's not just the reporting requirements, but that it's actually useful and a reliable source of information for families.
Teresa, I want to jump in here real quick. One of the other things that we've seen when we're looking at school district websites is you go to their special education page, and the first thing I see is procedural safeguards. The next thing I see is due process. And the next thing I see is this. That's not very reassuring as a parent when all I'm seeing is how to make a complaint and this huge long PDF of something I don't understand and I can't read, right? The procedural safeguards. one of the districts we worked with in Louisiana, as we were going through the first year of our pilot work, we were creating a landing page for them so we could be kind of like a trusted third party as an intermediary for their families and the school system. And through this work, they realized that their own special ed page was lacking. And so they took the initiative to revamp their whole page. And again, that's rewriting that narrative, rebuilding that trust that they are a reliable source of information. Because again, they had procedural safeguards, due process, all of that stuff. And they still have that on there, but they've moved it. And what they've done is they've said, here's who to contact if you have a question. Here is the different things that we cover under special education, right? They've made those changes, and that is going a long way in building that trust with families.
Perfect example. The second thing that I have up here is providing opportunities for feedback. And one of the barriers that I think we alluded to that, is that oftentimes as educators, we're afraid of saying the wrong thing. We're afraid of hearing what we might get back. And so we tend to control that narrative a little bit. And we forget how important it is to ask other people for feedback, ask other people about the experiences that they're having in their IEP meetings, or asking for opportunities for improvement, right? So sometimes the communication with our schools is very one-sided. So we're going to give you information, but we're not always receiving information back from you. So building in opportunities for feedback is something that we can really support our local school districts in doing, right? So if you already have opportunities where you're in front of families, building in some opportunities for them to share with us, right? Through a very structured protocol, even if we're worried about kind of it getting out of hand, but we can't be afraid of what we're going to hear back from families, which I think is sometimes a barrier to this particular strategy. And yes, sir, I'm going to hand you this again for the camera.
Yeah.
No, I have a voice that can hit the back row of the Met without really trying. We don't do that. Okay. You can ask our culture, our people, to give you feedback all day long. And we will take medieval, torture on the rack before we will give you feedback. And that's a problem that we have because we work very closely with the Department of Rehabilitative Services in my state, and we rely on feedback.
Yeah.
I'm on two of the governor's councils for that. And one of the reasons why they brought me on there was we want to know, and quote, how your people feel, end quote, of how we are servicing them or serving them. And, my first reaction when the governor asked me that question was, Your Honor, my people are not that different from your people. The issue is that you're not sending them their survey, after you finish serving them in their native language. So they're not going to answer you. They're not going to pay to have a translator translate this.
Right.
So find out who your audience is and ask them what you want in a language that they can understand. And mind you, my people have an average education of between third grade and sixth grade before they get sent to a coffee plantation, a sugarcane field, or, a banana plantation. So you're not dealing with the same level of literacy. What we need, in my opinion, is if educators are afraid of receiving or asking for feedback, think about us. We in our countries venerate what we call educators or docents. So what they say goes. It's a fiat that they're right. We're not going to question them. So we need to teach people how to exchange data, which in plain terms is communicating. That's not something that we do very well. I mean, 1.2 billion of us listen to one man with a pointy hat that tells us how to play. So imagine, we're not going to take to giving feedback very often. It would be like telling the priest, change the way that you pray because the way that you're working your church isn't reaching my heart like I'm supposed to be. That's not going to happen. And the analogy is that close because a lot of our educational systems are based on religious dogma.
Yeah.
I love this perspective.
And the other thing we have to remember too, when we're asking for feedback and for surveys, is your families that are already engaged are going to be more likely to give you that feedback. What are we doing to reach those families on either end of the spectrum? Right. Right. Yeah.
So just real quickly, I'll talk about networking and support. I don't have to, I'm preaching to the choir here that being a parent of a child with a disability can be very isolating, right? And so a lot of the times our families are looking for those opportunities to network with other families and to get that support. And so thinking about what's the role, right, of our local school systems, there are other families of kids with disabilities in the local community. How can we encourage and facilitate those opportunities, right? So these are just some things, again, to kind of be helping our school systems think about how can we build this in? Because when you are the entity that is creating these opportunities, it's going to help to build trust. And then last, but finally not least, to the point here that the families that you really need to reach are likely not going to come to, a special event or a coffee conversation or whatever the case may be, but they may be more likely to show up to their own child's IEP meeting. And so how do we build the capacity of the IEP team members to use that as an opportunity to engage families, right? It shouldn't, again, be this one-sided reading through the paperwork and asking for a signature. There's a lot, I think, of capacity building that can happen even at the IEP team level to think about that experience and that opportunity as a way to engage families in meaningful ways. So that's an entirely different presentation about collaborative IEP meetings, but I know these ladies have a thing or two to say about that as well.
So that leads right into a saying. There's a couple of sayings that we have at Exceptional Lives. One of them is every communication is an opportunity to build or lose trust, right? And to kind of segue from that is every form or document is an invitation for a conversation. There's so many times when I talk to parents and I ask them, hey, have you started transition planning for your high schooler? And they go, I don't know. And this is an 18-year-old senior, which in the state of Louisiana, by law, it has to be done at 16. Most other states, it's 14 or 15, right? So you have, but you had no idea you did. You had no idea what you signed. Another thing that we, came across in working with districts is our one of the districts, their parent notification notice was a whole lot of information on the first page, a whole lot of information on the top of the second page, and then the actual call to action was at the very bottom of that second page of when, where, what time was that meeting going to be at. And we're like, you guys, you've got to put that on the front page, right? If you're not having a conversation with that piece of paper that's going home, the information has to be right up front so parents know what, when, how, and then you can give them the rest of the information. But every communication, like I said, is an opportunity to build trust or lose trust. And then this also goes into one of our third sayings where we want to bank trust. If we set that foundation, even if it's a family that's already been in special ed for a while, if we reset that foundation of trust, of building that trust, then the families can bank trust. So when they have those bumps in the road, they know that they can go and talk to their SPED teacher. They could talk to the principal. They could talk to the SPED director at the district level before they have to come and see y'all, right? We want them to bank that trust to know that they can trust the system and they can work through whatever's going on, because those very angry, those very loud parents that are in the Facebook groups, the first thing they're going to tell them to do is go get an advocate, go get a lawyer, file a complaint. And it's like, but this just has to do with Dibbles testing, right? Like, I think we can work through this. Speaking from my own experience, right? I called my son's special educator teacher, text her at 6:30 in the morning and said, hey, can I talk to you for a second? She goes, yeah, I'm on the way to school. We talked about it. She goes, I got this. I'll take care of it. She goes into the school building. She took care of it. I got a phone call from somebody else saying, no, your kid's fine. This was already discussed at the IEP meeting. I missed the information. We're good, right? I could have very easily escalated that, and I didn't have to because I had a relationship. And so we want to build on these different components. And so when we talk about communication, and this is kind of one of Nell's favorite things, but when we talk about this, you know, this is written, it's verbal, it's the nonverbal. Are we sitting there like this? When our parents walk into an IEP meeting, does everybody have a computer open in front of them? Are we actively listening? And then we also have our cultural context. And it's not just about ethnicity and nationality, right? It's also, are these people from a rural area? The way that you work with someone in a rural area is going to be different than an urban area. Are you in a multi-generational household? Is this grandma or an aunt or uncle raising a child? Are you dealing with incarcerated parents? Are you dealing with children who are in the foster system or who have recently been adopted, right? There's all these.
This also applies to your relationships with educators and districts and states and other organizational partners. And again, we give this information to families too, to everyone. Part of, in addition to kind of cultural context, and we should maybe add this to the slide, there's another part of communication. Goes with nonverbal, but it's not quite the same thing, which is understanding what our nervous systems do in conflict. How overwhelmed are the people you're talking to?
Right.
Is this what they want to be doing with their day? Where have things gotten? Are they going to feel seen in their communication with you in a way that you can start to break through those automatic rejections that we all do, those automatic, like, what are you talking about? I don't have time to call parents. I know that. What would it look like to give you time? I'm so sorry. You should have more time. You should have more help. Right? How can we work on this relationship with families? Sometimes the families are that help. You know, it's so much better if I have a relationship where I'm going to tell my kids' teachers and the people who see them every day, right? Where I'm going to tell the special ed leader when something is going like awry before I'm fighting mad, right? We have to be conscious that everyone is doing their best, right? Everyone is for sure doing their best. And that the cultural context and kind of internal context of the people we're talking to matters in how well we can communicate a message and when we communicate those messages.
And we see, you know, one of the other things that we see a lot of, and Nell kind of touched on this earlier, is a lot of times if we have a student who has an exceptionality or a disability, the parent or parents probably do as well. I can speak for my own family. I look at my own parents and I'm like, oh, that's where that came from. Those apples don't fall too far from the tree there. And so we have to think about what kind of baggage or trauma the parent is also bringing in to the relationship with the school system, right? Not just the teacher or the school building, but the system as a whole. We have to think about that. And then there's just, you guys know, I know we're preaching to the choir, but there's so many things we have to think about when we think about cultural context. What works in one state like Louisiana or Alabama or other southern states is not going to work in the Northeast. Or what works in the Northeast is not going to work in southern states, right? So there's all kinds of cultural context that we have to think about there as well. Okay, let's see. Quick time check. We have about less than 10 minutes, so we're going to kind of move through some of these. These are some strategies for great communication. And we tell these to the building level and the district level people, but I think it's really important for you guys at the state level to scale back and remember, well, actually zoom in and remember these things, because you're the experts in what you're doing. We know that you're educated. We know that you're smart, but sometimes we forget that we're still talking to the public and we're still talking to families and parents and we're still talking to educators. And so we want to make sure that we're using empathy when we can. You know, we're keeping it clear and simple. We're using plain language. We're being explicit that we're on a team. What you guys are doing, it trickles down, it flows up. We want to make sure that we're on a team and we want to keep our conversations moving in both directions.
I also want to say that plain language resources make a really big difference when you have stressed out educators, just as much as when you have families who might not know all the words.
Yeah.
You know, it's a cognitive load question. In other presentations, we talk about this too. That's an entirely different
Separate.
session, but I want to say it here.
Yeah.
Right? When people are stressed out, their capacity to understand, words they're not used to, complex information goes down. We know this. And one of the challenges is that the special ed culture may feel real comfortable to some of the people who are in the conversation. It often feels very comfortable to the special ed administrators. It sort of feels comfortable to the special ed teachers, but there's some breakups that happen in culture there. The special ed teachers and then the gen ed teachers have some cultural differences. And everybody who gets stressed, everybody who feels like the other people don't like them, right? Everybody in that kind of conflict scenario can benefit from the language being clear enough to everyone. There's also a thing about plain language, which it can help break people out of using those acronyms and those, I call them like canned lines, right? We all have them that are just our natural response to any kind of question and cut off our ability to really think about the situation we're in. So plain language can help kind of disrupt the acronyms. It can disrupt that system in a really helpful way that's productive to get somewhere else.
Okay, so we have about 5 minutes left. So I'm going to go through these next ones pretty quickly because this is stuff that you guys know. So what do families need to know in the special ed process, right? Whether they're new or they're at a transition point, there's things that they need to know. We know this, right? We know who needs to get a written request. We know how many days this takes. We know all of this stuff. We know what's going to happen. We know the way in which it's going to happen, but families don't. We need to be very explicit with the information that we're sharing with them. When we say this is going to take 60 days, we need to be explicit that it's 60 school days. Because if you have a family that's coming in that's making some kind of request or a complaint or whatever in May, and they don't get resolution until August, and no one's told them that that's because there's school days, not calendar days, you're going to have an even more upset parent. And sometimes even an upset educator, because that's who the teacher may be going to say, hey, what's going on? What's happening? I haven't heard anything. So we have to be very explicit at each of these steps in what's going to happen. What are the expectations? What is the jargon? What is all of that? Yep.
We can go ahead and switch up to 34.
Okay. Doop. Okay, review and resources. So
You'll have these slides. We do find, you have the slides. We do find that sometimes it's helpful for people to like re-envision all of these opportunities to build trust before it gets to conflict, right? It can be really helpful for educators to hear it too. But because you're an expert audience, I think we can skip a little bit forward.
Yeah,
you
that's
can
fine.
review that. The other thing that these do is, I think it gives a pretty good example of how to present that information in a way everyone can understand.
yeah. So here's our recap. Again, I'm not going to read from the slide. You guys will have the slides. These are some resources specifically that we have on our website at Exceptional Lives. We have a special education hub. All of our special education information is in Spanish. It's been translated by Spanish speakers, so it's not just run through ChatGPT. Our special education glossary is also in Spanish. We have tools for our educators, and we also provide a lot of information that families are going to come to teachers and school building level people to ask about as far as financial benefits, health insurance. We know that they're going to go to one of two places, well, three places really. They're going to go to their pediatrician, they're going to go to their teacher, or they're going to go to the internet. And so we have all of that information in one place for them. So this is just a screenshot of what our glossary looks like. So you know that glossary in the back of procedural safeguards? We've taken that and we've written it. We've put that into plain language they can understand. There's also some links throughout where they can go and get more information. And some of this was even turned into video definitions for our visual and audio learners. We offer professional development. So you could go to our website and find out some more information about that. And all of our professional development, we offer a I can't think of the word, but we offer a family training that is the exact same topic. It's just through the family lens. Because again, that dual capacity framework, we want to build up both sides and we want to give them the same information. So that way they can both get that information in ways that's easy to understand. And then when you download these slides, all of these links are live. You can go straight to them to get to go to these resources. And then these are just some discussion questions to take back to your teams. How are we communicating with families to explain the process? What is your school, your district, your state doing to encourage family engagement? I know family engagement is a hot topic right now. Some states, if they don't already have one, are starting family engagement task forces. Some school districts are putting it in their strategic plans, and that's great. But what is the plan? What are we doing with these task force and these committees and the data that we're receiving? How are we going to make system changes? So just things to think about, and that kind of goes into how we can do it better. This is that is not the right email address. So my email address is on the left side, right side, left side. What side are we on? Right side of the presentation. I just realized that's the wrong email address. But something to take back, another thing to take back with you. What is one thing that you can do differently as of today's, as a result of today's training? If you want to sign up for our newsletter, we would love that. We send information out for our educators once or twice a month. And then here's Teresa's information. We should have put this on one slide. So that's it. And it is 11:45. We did it, guys.